go some way to explaining why all the events in the surprise attack on Israel from Gaza in 2023 happened. Disclaimer: at no point in this video am I equating Hamas with Islam, with being a Palestinian, with being an Arab or an Israeli Arab. I am equating Hamas with being Hamas. And anytime during the video, don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe, and to, of course, post the comments down below, especially when you have a good argument against me. I want to hear your arguments. Let's discuss this. Let's have a discussion. And also, we're going to go to some way to explaining what is Hamas and what is Israel's policy. This isn't an ordinary explained video. This is a video going on in the context of a war that's continuously happening right now, and I'm right in the middle of it in Jerusalem. We need to know a little bit about what's going on right now. What's going on right now is last week a hospital was allegedly bombed by the Israelis. Allegedly, meaning it wasn't bombed at all by the Israelis. In fact, there were no Israeli aircraft in the air. There were no Israeli missile batteries firing their missiles or rockets. There was nothing in the air. There was intended to be a Hamas attack from Gaza. Rockets fired from Gaza. These rockets did not go as intended. In fact, a large proportion of rockets, I'm going to express the proportion on my subtitles appearing right now, don't leave Gaza. They either land inside Gaza or they explode, or when they are aimed and fired. And that's exactly what happened. According to most of the video evidence and most of the evidence from the army spokesperson unit, Hamas killed a lot of their own people attempting to kill Israelis. And this, as we're going to learn, is fairly normal for Hamas. You're also going to be hearing in the news about Israel recommending that all the Gazans move south to the south of Gaza, and the problems with that, and the fact that Gazans find it very hard to move at all. And we're going to be finding out in this video, why is it Gazans find it hard really to move at all, to anywhere? We are on the cusp of an invasion. Israel has not yet officially put ground troops into Gaza. However, Gaza is going to pretty soon turn into a bloodbath, and we should really find out why. So, what is Hamas and who is Hamas? So before we understand about Hamas themselves, we're going to do us a little bit of a history lesson about Gaza and about Israel. So firstly, you may hear about the 75-year occupation of the whole of Palestine, including Gaza. This is wrong. Wrong, just wrong. Like you can claim that Tel Aviv, for example, if you want to say Tel Aviv should be a Palestinian state, that you could say has been controlled by Israel for 75 years. Gaza wasn't. So to understand what I'm talking about, you have to understand what happened in 1948. What happened in 1948, and I'm happy to do another video on this one. In 1948, there was a massive Palestinian refugee crisis. So Palestinians left their homes. Palestinians were on the move. Palestinians went to various different refugee camps, both inside and outside what became the country of Israel in 1948. And this caused a lot of discontent. And this discontent slowly started to congeal into different movements of resistance, or different movements of, some would say terrorism as well, against Israel. One place they fled to was an Egyptian-controlled area. And this Egyptian-controlled area is, of course, Gaza itself. Gaza has not been occupied for 75 years. It was occupied from 1967 until 2005. before that, it was occupied, and I'm going to use the term occupied, a foreign force in controlling a piece of land which might not really be theirs to control. And if that's what you want to say Israel is doing, we can have a whole argument about that. And sometimes depends on the issue, really. But with Gaza, it was occupied by Egypt. And guess how many big protests there were about that? None. And guess how wonderful Egyptian occupation was? Pretty horrible, really. In fact, Egypt's main response to the issue of the Palestinian refugee crisis was to arm the Palestinians and send them back into Israel. They created an organisation known as the Fedayeen. The Fedayeen, originally farmers going back to their lands over the border, met Israelis, got into a bit of a firefight, eventually became an organised resistance. And an organisation was called the Storm, the first Palestinian organisation for the first Palestinian militant nationalistic organisation. This eventually morphed into the PLO that we know. Except the PLO that we know had a very, very, very specific focus. It was influenced by Nasserism, Pan-Arabist Nasserism, which was a secular movement to unite all Arabs. So the nationalism of the PLO, which was an umbrella movement for many different nationalisms, it, generally speaking, was secularist. Creating a big umbrella between slightly more religious outlooks and more socialistic outlooks and communistic outlooks and Maoist outlooks. It was a collection of lots of different movements, but it wasn't really religious. And one of the big things about the PLO, if you've been following your history, the PLO were really, really quite pragmatic, to such an extent that finally in the 90s, 1993, they signed a peace agreement with Israel. And this is known as the Oslo Peace Accords. And this is really painting in broad swathes here. We can go into more detail and maybe another time I will. There was an organisation who were against this, and there were an organisation all the way through from the 80s who were against this secularism. And even at one point they got a little bit of backing from Israel, not because of Israel supporting them really strongly, just an idea of divide and conquer. That's how I think you'll find many counterintelligence networks work. They support groups within states and within organisations and within terrorist organisations that will subvert them. The CIA do this all the time. Not talking about whether it's right or wrong here. And this organisation, which was against the secularism of the PLO, was called Hamas. It took on the ideology of a much older organisation known as the Muslim Brotherhood. Getting complex, I know. The Muslim Brotherhood were an Islamist organisation. In fact, they were one of the first ones, and they believed that Islam could be a force for political change in the world, a positive force for political change in the world. But there were elements of the Muslim Brotherhood which were fairly violent, believed in violent political change with an Islamic aim to create an Islamic caliphate, an Islamic rule by a supreme religious leader. If you're thinking this sounds like ISIS, I have news to you. The people who founded Al-Qaeda and later on ISIS were originally Muslim Brotherhood members too. And they, yes, had a Islamist attitude, an attitude to create political change in the world with a Muslim religious political goal. Now, Hamas started off as a movement as opposed to the PLO, very much a grassroots civil society movement. And then as Oslo gained more and more steam, Hamas became fairly disillusioned with the PLO, carrying out attacks on the PLO and eventually carrying out attacks on Israel. Bus bombings, what we call suicide bombings, and they had a organisation known as their military wing known as the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam Brigade, which is a brigade focused on the Muslim Brotherhood member who'd been killed by the British in the 1930s, known as Izz ad-Din al-Qassam, and their focus was on destroying Israel. They decided that the main problem was the Zionist entity, Israel, and this was the beginning of Hamas. We're going to stop there. And we're going to ask, so what is the ideology of Hamas? Hamas is a movement with a definitive, written down ideology. If you claim to be pro-Hamas, you have to read their documents. Now, many experts in Hamas will tell you that Hamas has a new charter, that many anti-Hamas people are going to be quoting their old charter, which doesn't apply now. There's a new charter. No, the word in Arabic isn't charter. The word in Arabic is mithaq and wathika. Mithaq is a binding charter, meaning what you write down you have to do, a covenant. Wathika is just a document. There was an original charter which Hamas says they're keeping on their website for historical purposes, and they're keeping in their party's kind of archives just for historical purposes. Yeah, because it's a mithaq. It's still binding. The Wathika, the new document produced in 2017, modifies the mithaq slightly, but how much it actually changes it, well, you be the judge, really. Based on their activity, we're going to find out how much it really changes. So what's in the mithaq? What's in the 1987 Charter of Hamas? So firstly, Article 3 upholds that Allah, meaning the Muslim concept of God, is to rule over every inch of Palestine. There is to be no changes in that one, no misunderstandings in that one. Every inch of Palestine. Article 7 sees the goal of Hamas as a part of the link in the chain against the Zionist invaders. The Zionists are considered invaders. It describes this Zionist entity as a combination of conspiracies between worldwide press and banking and clubs such as the Rotary Club, the Masons and the Lions. I had to look up the Lions. I didn't know who they were. Apparently a secret organisation like the Freemasons. If you're starting to think this sounds like a anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, that's because it is. It might as well have been copied from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, one of the first conspiracy theories, modern conspiracy theories against Jews. It also makes sweeping claims about Jews and Jewish power, that Jews caused the French Revolution, that Jews caused many revolutions, that the Jews do all these things. Now, the charter, the Mithaq of Hamas, quotes a specific piece of oral law. It has to be understood. You don't just open the Quran and understand what it means. You do have to, rather like Judaism, follow certain schools of oral law. Not all Muslims follow all different schools of oral law. This is a specific oral law, or the recorded sayings of Muhammad, recorded by a cleric by the name of Al-Bukhari. This specific piece of oral law it quotes says, and this is in Article 7 of the Hamas Mithaq, that Judgment Day will not come about until the Muslims go out and massacre the Jews, fight the Jews and kill them. It says, specific verbatim, is the Day of Judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. The Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, but the rocks and trees will call out and say, "Oh Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind behind me." And then one particularly treacherous tree didn't call out, so that tree was cursed. This is the ideology of Hamas. They look forward to a day when Muslims will kill Jews. So if we look at the charter, the Midak, clearly says, clearly anti-Semitic, clearly is focused on wiping out Jews. It's actually influenced by a 1930s charter of the Muslim Brotherhood, which in turn was influenced by Nazi Germany. Like, that's really what's been going on here. Look at what's been happening. I can't help reading the words of the charter without thinking what happened in Kfar Aza and in Be'eri and in Nahal Oz. So what happened after the formation of Hamas? It opposed the Oslo Peace Accords. It really was the main force behind what we call the Second Intifada. And all during this period, there is no blockade of Gaza. They weren't even in charge of Gaza. Not even talking, even before the blockade of Gaza, we're talking about suicide attacks on Israel. Then, in 2006, there was a legislative election in the Palestinian Authority. Palestinians were moving more and more towards independence, and they kind of still are. And who were the winners of the election? Well, you'd think the PLO, no? Signatories of the Oslo Peace Accords? Well, no, that they were actually shockingly corrupt. They still are shockingly corrupt. And Hamas was considered the relatively non-corrupt, because they're corrupt too, the relatively non-corrupt alternative. And they won with a landslide victory. In fact, I never know if the Oslo Peace Accords were that popular based on the 2006 legislative election. This resulted in two things. It resulted in Hamas being kicked out of the West Bank. Now we have a look at a map. We have a map here. One side is Gaza, on the other side is the West Bank. They're really two separate territories. According to the peace accords, they wanted to connect them. And Hamas was kicked out of the West Bank, and the PLO, Fatah, were kicked out of Gaza. Fatah is the name of one of the biggest organisations within the PLO, the party of Yasser Arafat himself, and now the party of Abu Mazen. They're kicked out of Gaza. Prior to this, in 2005, due to a shocking number of missiles coming over from Gaza before the blockade, missiles and incursions, Ariel Sharon took the unilateral decision to remove all Israeli troops from Gaza. Yes, there was plans to create some kind of border fence, but it was thought that maybe the PLO would be administrating Gaza. After the 2006 election, no. Since 2005 and the Israeli pull out from Gaza, meaning no Israelis in Gaza. They cannot be called in 2005 an occupying force. They're not even there. You can say maybe the fence around is a symbol of their occupation. It's not occupation. It's pre-border control, or it's boundary control. Because, get this, there were rockets coming over. Not that many in 2004, but 2005 more. And then by 2006, we're already talking about 1,000 rockets. More than 1,000. And multiple Israeli deaths. How did Israel respond? Well, firstly, the international community responded by insisting that Hamas gives up all terrorist methods, and Hamas refused. They refused. The international community, not Israel. So Israel in response decided to blockade, not siege Gaza. What's the difference in a blockade and a siege? You know, you say tomato, I say I'm not letting in anything that can be turned into a weapon, thank you very much. The difference is that a blockade means things can cross over the boundary fence. Food, medical supplies, things for building. The problem was, based on what I referred to in the earlier video, these came back in the form of missiles. The Hamas used a piping for infrastructure to make missiles. They certainly also, funnily enough, they used weapons as weapons. So there had to be a control, some kind of border control. If you want to say there should be two states, a Palestinian state and an Israeli state, then you would assume the Israeli state would want border controls, would want to control weaponry that's coming through, because it's being used by Hamas, which has gone on public record as saying they will not accept a Jewish state and will fight against it. So there was a blockade, and the blockade started to get more and more serious as it turned out they were using concrete to make attack tunnels. So now we're talking what the international community calls the blockade around Gaza. And because Hamas prior to this had said they would carry on fighting Israel, carried on fighting shooting over the rockets, and in response the Israeli Air Force brought over planes. And the planes, F-16s, dropped bombs on where they believed the rockets were coming from. Now we're going to explain Israel's policy towards Hamas after 2005 and the Hamas response and the dynamic that we're talking about. And it used things such as text messaging buildings they were about to bomb.
אתה מדבר עברית? מצוין. מה שמך? מה שלומך? הכל בסדר? צבא ישראלי כרגע, אנחנו צריכים להפציץ את הבית שנמצא באמצע, אנחנו עושים את כל המאמצים שלא יפגע בבתים האחרים שום דבר, אנחנו רק רוצים לוודא לפני כן שאין אף אחד מסביב. תוודא בבקשה שאין שם אף אחד, תגיד לאנשים שלא כי עוד 5 דקות אנחנו מפציצים.
Also what they call the pre-bomb before they shot a bomb to clear the building. Of course, the international community, many people in the international community see this as psychological warfare. Can't please everybody all the time. And tried as hard as possible not to kill civilians. Of course, this is firstly impossible, and secondly impossible because Hamas was putting its missile launch sites in civilian centres. This came out most clearly when I think it was either an Indian or Pakistani, an Indian crew was filmed the launch of a missile from near their hotel in a civilian area. They launch missiles from UN facilities. They launch missiles from hospitals. They do this on purpose. Ismail Haniyeh has gone on the record saying that it is forbidden to leave a building if they understand the Israelis are going to shoot it. They are literally using their own people as human shields. And this
قبل ساعتين من الآن ب3 صواريخ من قبل طائرات الاستطلاع الصهيوني، يعني خطوة جريئة قامت بها المواطنون بالتجمهر أو الاعتلاء سطح هذا المنزل، يعني لمنع طائرات الاحتلال
أن يتعرض الناس وأن يواجهوا الطيران العسكري الإسرائيلي بصدور عارية ليحموا بيوتهم. أعتقد أن هذه سياسة أثبتت نجاعتها، ونحن في الحركة ندعو شعبنا إلى اعتماد هذه السياسة.
This fulfills their messianic belief in killing all the Jews. You can sacrifice yourself to kill the Jews. So the best way I can do it is by explaining it through this analogy, and I've got this infographic for you. you've got two people fighting, and this is a brilliant analogy for Israel and Hamas. And they're both drawn guns, and they've both got these guns pointed at each other's heads. Then at the last minute, one guy pulls out a baby and puts the baby in front of him because he knows that the other guy he's fighting doesn't shoot babies. So who are you going to find morally at fault for all of this? If one guy should actually shoot the baby that's protecting the other guy, well, obviously, the guy shooting the baby didn't have to shoot a baby. You know, it's a morally reprehensible thing to do. That's really, really, really quite terrible. Except in the following case. This is what a lot of people like to say. Israel is, shooting the innocent person that got in the way. It's almost like Israel is punishing the innocent person that got in the way. So you have to think about it like this. And in our analogy, we're going to make a slight change. The two guys fighting. One guy pulls out a child to protect himself. The other guy carries on fighting and hurts the child. Why? Because what's behind the guy who hurt the child? Another child. Israel is morally obligated to protect its citizens and its children. And based on recent events, this isn't an analogy even. There are Gazan children dying because Israel is having to fight Hamas to protect its own children. We had children massacred. Again, not all Muslims. Believe me, once again, I have had personal friends, Palestinians, call me up to tell me, my family, that they disagree with Hamas. They didn't need to do that. We didn't think they were supporting them anyway. Who would? They're really quite vicious. I'm also going to explode another thing. I already said that, talked about the Egyptian occupation of Gaza. So maybe you want to claim that this situation in Gaza is created by Israel and Israel's occupation, that Israel blockades Gaza and stops certain essential goods from coming in, and you want to ignore that that's to do with weaponry. And then maybe you want to claim that Israel is bombing not because rockets are being shot at them. The question I have to ask you is then, why is Israel occupying Gaza? What is the purpose of Israel occupying Gaza? Look at Gaza on the map. It doesn't fulfill any strategic facilities for Israel, apart from maybe if we were in there we could stop Hamas. But again, that's to do with Hamas, not to do with Israel and the greater aim there. It has no natural resources apart from the natural resources that Israelis brought there when we had kibbutzim, which we don't have anymore. Fruit and vegetables we can get. Those other places, it has no oil. It has no access to the sea. We have the rest of the coast. Why would we be occupying Gaza? Well, really, one of the things which people who protest against Israel will tell you, because of colonization. Colonization means having an empire. Colonization means Jews wish to take over other countries and other areas. That is anti-Semitism. It is pure anti-Semitism. The only desire for Jews is to have this state and this land, not other lands. There were Jews who were in favour and still are in favour of taking over Gaza. That is a proportion of the Israeli population, not all of it, and doesn't even reflect all Israeli politicians. Please be careful when you say that. Why would we want Gaza? Only one reason that we want to attack Gaza now: because Hamas is attacking us. We're not even attacking Gaza. We're attacking Hamas. Hamas attacks us, so we attack Hamas. If you want to call that an occupation, then I guess we understand occupation differently. With connecting to also the Hamas opposition to Oslo. Hamas are the rightful inheritors of the what we would call the rejectionist stance of the Palestinian people. That there is a stream of or a tendency in some Palestinians towards rejecting any peace and any kinds of discussions, and that is really inherited by Hamas. Hamas do not want to be part of any kind of peace process, and this means derailing these talks with Saudi Arabia. How do you do that? Get Israel to fight you. Get Israel to kill many of your people. Get Israel to attack. Do something horrendous which will make Israel enter Gaza and carry on a war. And this is exactly what Hamas wants. You say, oh, well, why give it to them? There is really no choice when you are attacked to such an extent. This, unfortunately, is a completely, or could be a completely successful attempt by Hamas to derail this whole process. And that really brings us to the key point. The key point of Hamas is they wish for control over the Palestinian national narrative only through violent action and violent anti-Semitic action. Nothing else fits into their worldview. Why did this all happen now? Because they wanted to derail any negotiations, and they wanted to really create a heightened profile for the continued idea that there must be a resistance and a violent, what they define as a resistance, and a violent resistance against the Jewish state. When you're talking about the Zionist entity, about Israel, that's what they call Israel, the Zionist entity, you're talking about the only Jewish state in the world. They wish to fight this state. They wish to wipe the Jews out from this area of the world. That is their only solution, based on their outlook. So what do you do? For that, you're going to have to watch the next video. A lot of this video, you might have noticed, is focused on people who might be compelled to support Hamas. Let's make it clear. Outside of the issue with Israel, Hamas are a bigoted organisation which enforces a 10-year prison sentence for somebody found to be committing homosexual acts. They have also executed people for homosexual acts. They enforce a hijab in public spaces rule. They are very, very similar to many of the hyper-conservative, extremist Muslim regimes in the world, such as Iran. If you are supporting Hamas, this is what you are supporting. It actually beggars belief that I see people, LGBTQ people, activists in America marching for Hamas and marching for Gaza. To a great extent, Hamas is keeping the people of Gaza hostage. It is them who are also keeping the people of Gaza hostage. There is a website down below which you can see many different stories of people inside Gaza and the difficulties they face for expressing any opinion against the party line on Israel. You also expect in Gaza prison time or worse. You have to ask yourself, which organisation would you want representing the Palestinian people? And I have Palestinian friends, and they're going to tell me they don't want Hamas representing them. That is not what they want. Israel is not fighting the Gazan people, it's fighting Hamas, and Hamas are putting the Gazan people firmly in the way so that they can absorb all the violence, and Hamas keeps the Gazan people firmly under their thumb. While I've been producing this video, in addition to the hundreds of people dying from Israeli airstrikes due to the Hamas policy of creating a human shield. Also, we have to remember what has spurred this on. And for this, just look at this picture. This is the Kedem family. Tamar, Yonatan, Shachar, Arbel and Omer were all killed in the attacks of October 8th. We have to remember that this is the reason, and one of the big reasons, that there is now going to be an almighty war in Gaza. What can you do to help? Well as I've been all the time, I'm not posting a Patreon, I'm not posting my Ko-Fi, I'm posting the link to United Hatzalah. Please donate to United Hatzalah. I say this, there are many other worthy charities that even I'm involved with, but I'm posting United Hatzalah to this video with the assumption that both Jews and Muslims, both right-wing and left-wing, could be watching this video. And I think this is the most universalistic charity to be donating towards, as it helps both Jews and Arabs, but people regardless of their religion work for United Hatzalah. So please donate to United Hatzalah. Also, I want people to understand who Hamas is. I want people to understand Hamas because they get support from outside of Israel. There have been solidarity rallies in London, solidarity rallies in New York, and I assume there's at least one person in the solidarity rally who might not be completely wedded to the Hamas cause, might be willing to research things and find things out, and for that reason they have to see videos like this. Please like this video, please share this video, and please subscribe.